Tom jolted awake to the deafening silence. Something was wrong. Usually, the rhythmic hum of his farm's irrigation system served as the heartbeat of the early morning, a comforting sound that guaranteed another productive day. But that day, it was gone, replaced by an eerie void that sent chills down his spine. Rushing outside, he found his once-beloved basketball court, the pride of his community, reduced to rubble. Concrete chunks, shattered nets, and torn lines lay scattered across what used to be a vibrant hub of local sports and camaraderie. For years, that court had been more than just a patch of asphalt. It was a sanctuary where neighbors gathered for spirited pickup games, where local legends were born, and where the community bonded over shared victories and defeats. Now, it was nothing but debris, a casualty of the HOA's latest round of improvements enforced without a second thought. Tom's heart pounded with a mix of anger, disbelief, and determination. He knew this wasn't a random act of vandalism. It was a calculated decision by the HOA board to restructure the community's recreational spaces, ignoring the fact that his basketball court was protected under national sports laws designed to safeguard facilities that promote physical fitness, community engagement, and local talent development. As he stood there amidst the ruins, a fierce resolve began to crystallize within him. The community's voice would be heard, and those responsible for this injustice would be held accountable. Little did the HOA know, Tom was not just an ordinary resident. He was a former high school coach, an advocate for youth sports, and a passionate defender of community rights. With every fiber of his being, he vowed to fight back. He would rally the community, mobilize legal experts, and expose the HOA's overreach for all to see. Today, his mission was clear: rebuild the court and turn this tragedy into a triumphant declaration of freedom, a declaration that no one, not even the HOA, could trample on the spirit of local sports. Cedar Springs, a picturesque rural community, was known for its expansive farmlands, friendly neighbors, and a deep-rooted love for sports. At its heart was a well-worn basketball court, a sprawling patch of asphalt that had served as a communal gathering place for decades. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the court buzzed with the sound of bouncing balls, laughing children, and the occasional cheer of a victorious team. It was more than a recreational facility. It was a symbol of unity, a place where local talent blossomed, and where the spirit of competition and camaraderie thrived. The court was situated on the outskirts of Cedar Springs, on a sprawling property owned by Tom Matthews, a lifelong resident and a former high school coach with a deep passion for youth sports. Tom's farm had been in his family for generations, a blend of working land and cherished memories. Amidst the rows of crops and the rustic charm of a weathered farmhouse, the basketball court stood as a tribute to community values, built with love and a commitment to fostering local talent. In stark contrast to this free-spirited, grassroots environment was the local Homeowners Association, HOA, a bureaucratic entity obsessed with uniformity and strict adherence to outdated aesthetic standards. The HOA board had long imposed its vision of improvement on Cedar Springs, often clashing with residents who value tradition and community spirit over sterile conformity. At the forefront of this authoritarian regime was a figure known simply as HOA Karen, a stern, no-nonsense administrator who believed that every inch of the community should meet her rigid standards. To Karen, the rustic basketball court was an eyesore, an unsightly relic that did not conform to the polished image she wanted for Cedar Springs. Tom, however, had always been a champion of the court. Having spent countless hours coaching and mentoring local kids, he knew that the court was protected under national sports laws, a safeguard ensuring that public recreational facilities, which nurtured both physical fitness and community cohesion, were preserved. These laws were not mere guidelines. They were legal instruments designed to protect the cultural and athletic heritage of communities like Cedar Springs. When news broke that the HOA had ordered the demolition of the basketball court under the pretense of community improvement, Tom was devastated. Not only had they destroyed a vital social hub, but they had also trampled on the very laws designed to protect it. As he surveyed the ruined court, memories of late-night practices, heart-pounding games, and community celebrations flooded his mind. This wasn't just about a physical space. It was about preserving a legacy, a way of life that had bonded generations of Cedar Springs residents. Determined to right this wrong, Tom knew he had to mobilize every resource available. He began reaching out to neighbors, local sports enthusiasts, and legal experts, rallying support for a movement to reclaim the court and hold the HOA accountable. His deep understanding of the national sports laws, coupled with his personal connection to the court, gave him both the passion and the legal grounding to fight back. What began as a personal loss was quickly transforming into a battle for the soul of Cedar Springs, a fight to preserve a communal space that had defined the community for decades. The demolition of the basketball court was swift and ruthless. One chilly morning, without any warning or public notice, heavy machinery had arrived at Cedar Springs and begun tearing apart the court. The roar of engines and the clanging of metal filled the air as workers dismantled the beloved court piece by piece. Neighbors gathered at a distance, shocked and dismayed, as the last remnants of the court were crushed under layers of rubble. Tom had been out on his farm when the demolition began. The sight of his cherished court, a testament to community resilience and athletic spirit, being reduced to a pile of debris was a punch to the gut. His calls to the HOA went unanswered, and when he finally managed to speak to a board representative, he was met with cold indifference. A terse explanation that the court no longer met the HOA's modern aesthetic standards. The explanation was ludicrous, given that national sports laws clearly protected the facility, and it ignited a fierce determination in Tom to fight back. Fueled by anger and armed with the knowledge of his rights, Tom began documenting the devastation. He captured photos and videos of the demolition, noting the timestamps and every detail of the process. He also compiled testimonies from neighbors who witnessed the event, each recounting their own memories of playing on that court, from youth league games to community fundraisers. These emotional accounts underscored not only the physical loss of the court, but also the deep cultural wound inflicted upon the community. As word of the demolition spread, the digital outrage exploded. Social media was flooded with posts under hashtags like #SaveOurCourt, #CedarSpringsStrong, and #NoMoreHOA. Neighbors shared tearful stories of the court's importance in their lives, and local sports clubs began organizing rallies. Legal experts soon weighed in, affirming that national sports laws provided robust protection for public recreational facilities, and that the HOA's actions were not only unethical, but potentially illegal. Tom knew that merely documenting the tragedy wouldn't suffice. He needed to respond in a way that would turn the tables on the HOA, and, in particular, on HOA Karen, the architect of this senseless act. With a spark of ingenuity, he devised a plan. If the HOA could destroy the court, then he would reclaim the community's heart by restoring what had been lost. But more than that, he would strike back at those who dared to overstep their bounds. He began by reaching out to local contractors, sports facility experts, and legal advisors. His plan was to rebuild the court, but with a twist that would send a message that the community's rights could not be suppressed by bureaucratic overreach. Simultaneously, Tom started a petition demanding that the HOA board reverse their decision and compensate the community for the loss of such a vital public space. The petition quickly gathered momentum, with signatures from hundreds of residents who were united in their grief and their determination for justice. In the meantime, the legal community was abuzz with the implications of the demolition. Lawyers specializing in sports and property law argued that the court was protected under national sports laws, which guaranteed that public facilities used for athletic and community purposes could not be arbitrarily destroyed. This legal backing provided Tom with not only a moral high ground, but a formidable weapon in his fight against the HOA. The conflict was now a multi-front battle. On one side was the HOA, a bureaucratic entity that prided itself on order and conformity. On the other side was a community fighting for its cultural and recreational identity, led by a man who had dedicated his life to the sport. Tom's digital dossier, filled with photos, videos, and emotional testimonies, became a rallying point for the community. Every shared post, every hashtag, every comment of support reinforced the message that the basketball court was not just a piece of asphalt. It was the beating heart of Cedar Springs. As the pressure mounted, the HOA board was forced to call an emergency meeting to address the outcry. The meeting was tense, with board members divided between those who still clung to their outdated aesthetic mandates and those who recognized the community's overwhelming desire for change. Tom attended the meeting, armed with his evidence and a resolve forged in heartbreak and determination. He spoke passionately about the significance of the court, about the national sports laws that protected it, and about the need for the HOA to prioritize the well-being of the community over arbitrary rules. Karen, who had long positioned herself as the unyielding enforcer of community standards, found her authority slipping away as residents and even some board members began to question her motives. The digital evidence and the public's reaction painted a damning portrait of a bureaucrat who had overstepped her bounds, and the community was ready to reclaim its voice. By the end of that turbulent week, it was clear that the battle was far from over. The HOA's decision had sparked a movement that now demanded accountability, justice, and the restoration of a cherished community asset. Tom's plan to rebuild the court and to force the HOA to face the legal implications of their actions was set in motion, and the stage was now ready for a dramatic confrontation that would redefine the future of Cedar Springs. In the days following the demolition, the atmosphere in Cedar Springs grew increasingly charged with emotion and resolve. Social media exploded with the story of the destroyed court, and digital petitions demanding justice gathered thousands of signatures. Neighbors who had once quietly endured the HOA's authoritarian rules now took to online forums, local news outlets, and public gatherings to voice their outrage. Every post, every shared video clip of the demolition became a testament to the community's deep sense of loss and the urgent need for change. Local news stations swung into action. Reporters drove through the neighborhood, capturing the scene of devastation and interviewing residents who spoke passionately about the court's role in their lives. This court was where our kids learned teamwork and perseverance. One elderly neighbor lamented on live TV, tears glistening in his eyes. To see it reduced to rubble by a group of bureaucrats is nothing short of a cultural tragedy. The coverage resonated deeply, turning what had been a localized issue into a public debate about property rights and the limits of HOA authority. Within the HOA board, internal tensions reached a boiling point. Emergency meetings were held in hushed, tense conference rooms, and leaked minutes revealed deep divisions. Some board members, who had long defended the strict aesthetic guidelines, now found themselves questioning whether the rules they had been enforcing were truly in the community's best interests. Heated arguments broke out over the interpretation of national sports laws and the legality of the court's destruction. Our community is built on tradition and unity, not on sterile uniformity. One dissenting board member was quoted as saying, sparking fierce debates among his colleagues. Tom's digital dossier became the focal point of the controversy. He uploaded detailed videos and photo montages that chronicled every moment of the demolition, from the arrival of heavy machinery to the final moments when the last piece of the court was crushed underfoot. Each image was accompanied by heartfelt testimonials from residents who recounted how the court had served as a venue for community events, neighborhood celebrations, and the cultivation of local talent. The narrative was clear. The basketball court was not just a recreational facility. It was a vital part of Cedar Springs' cultural fabric. The legal implications of the demolition quickly came to the fore. Prominent local attorneys began to weigh in on the issue, arguing that the court was protected under national sports laws that guaranteed the preservation of public recreational facilities. These experts explained that the court had been a legally recognized community asset, and its destruction constituted not just a breach of HOA regulations, but a violation of federal protections designed to foster athletic development and community cohesion. This legal perspective added a formidable layer to the public outcry, shifting the debate from one of mere aesthetics to one of constitutional and legal rights. As public pressure mounted, grassroots movements sprang into action. Neighborhood groups organized rallies and sit-ins outside the HOA office, and public forums were held in community centers where residents shared their own experiences of arbitrary fines and invasive inspections. The hashtag Save Our Court became ubiquitous, with supporters posting pictures of past games, memorable victories, and the smiles of local kids who had grown up playing on that very court. Every shared post reinforced the community's collective demand for justice and accountability. The tension escalated further when the HOA board announced that a final public hearing would be held to address the controversy. This hearing was framed as the community's last chance to right the wrongs inflicted upon Cedar Springs. In the days leading up to the hearing, residents flooded the digital petition with signatures, and influential bloggers and local figures began to champion the cause, calling for a new era of fairness in community governance. The digital momentum was undeniable, and it was clear that if the board failed to act, the legacy of the demolished court and the abuse of power that had led to its destruction would haunt them for years to come. In the midst of this turmoil, Tom continued to update his online community with live streams and detailed breakdowns of every piece of evidence. His determination, fueled by a deep personal connection to the court, resonated with countless residents who saw in him a symbol of resistance against bureaucratic overreach. The narrative had transformed. What began as a dispute over a recreational facility had evolved into a battle for the very soul of Cedar Springs, a fight to protect the rights of every homeowner and to ensure that public spaces dedicated to sports and community engagement remained inviolate. As the final public hearing loomed, the energy in Cedar Springs was palpable. Every digital post, every hashtag, and every shared testimonial was a declaration that the community would no longer tolerate the oppressive actions of an overreaching HOA. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, one that would force the board to either reaffirm its outdated policies or embrace a future where property rights, cultural heritage, and individual expression were celebrated. The mounting digital evidence and the collective will of the residents had built an unyielding force, one that promised to redefine the future of Cedar Springs. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp, clear morning at the Cedar Springs Community Center. The boardroom was packed with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a sea of determined residents, each one there to witness the final public hearing that would determine the fate of our neighborhood's enforcement policies. With an unyielding presence and calm resolve, Councilwoman Emily Roberts stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the collective hope and determination of a community that had been pushed to its breaking point. After a comprehensive review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, expert legal opinions, and the heartfelt testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Roberts began, her voice resonating with authority. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by the HOA in demolishing our cherished basketball court were not rooted in any legitimate concern for public safety or community order, but were driven by arbitrary enforcement and a blatant abuse of power. Our basketball court was a protected community asset, enshrined under national sports laws, and its destruction was a violation of both our rights and our heritage. A heavy silence fell over the room as Roberts continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all fines and sanctions related to the demolition of the basketball court, and we will initiate a full disciplinary review of the practices that allowed such a gross overreach. We will also implement new guidelines to safeguard our public recreational facilities and to ensure that all future actions are grounded in respect for our legal rights and community values. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an unjust act. It is a resounding declaration that our community will stand for fairness, accountability, and the right to nurture our cultural and athletic heritage. Her words were met with a wave of applause, as murmurs of agreement spread throughout the assembly. At that moment, a respected community advocate, a longtime champion of property and cultural rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united," he declared, his voice firm and impassioned. "No resident should have their heritage and community spirit trampled by arbitrary rules. Let this vote mark the turning point, a clear signal that Cedar Springs values creativity, athleticism, and the sanctity of our public spaces above all else. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every violation of our rights is met with swift, decisive action. His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting everyone in a collective call for justice. Following his address, a senior officer from the local sports authority presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies on national sports laws, and official documents proving that the basketball court was legally protected. The evidence was irrefutable. The demolition was not only an abuse of power, but it was also in direct violation of laws meant to protect community recreational facilities. The Internal Affairs panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those responsible, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release. Councilwoman Roberts concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Cedar Springs, a community where every resident's rights and our cultural heritage are honored, and where public authority is exercised with integrity and respect." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will defend our public spaces and that no one, no matter how powerful, can impose their will on our community without accountability. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the inalienable right to live and play in a community that celebrates our shared values. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our struggle for justice. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of our community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Cedar Springs. The days of arbitrary demolition and petty fines were over, and a future built on respect for our heritage and public rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Cedar Springs underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded fines and the sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and social networks, sparking fervent discussions about property rights, cultural heritage, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Cedar Springs" and "Community United for Athletic Freedom," celebrated the decisive action taken to safeguard our public recreational facilities. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHOA, and #PlayOnForever trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand up against arbitrary rule enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw a record attendance as residents gathered to share their stories and to envision a future where public spaces were protected and celebrated. Neighbors who had long felt the sting of invasive fines and reckless demolitions now spoke proudly about their right to maintain community landmarks that held deep personal and cultural meaning. Our basketball court wasn't just a place to play. It was a symbol of our community's spirit. One resident declared passionately at a packed meeting, his words resonating with hope and resolve. The atmosphere was one of renewal, a promise that Cedar Springs would always honor its heritage and the rights of its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local sports authority, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs on ethical governance, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of public resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary processes were established to ensure that every complaint was thoroughly investigated and that no resident would ever again suffer from arbitrary enforcement. Our duty is to protect the rights and traditions of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed during a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice and integrity. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized to further empower residents. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about property rights and the importance of preserving cultural heritage, especially in public recreational facilities. When we stand together, Our voices have the power to reshape our community's future, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite in the fight for a more inclusive and equitable governance model. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to fight against the arbitrary destruction of our basketball court, fueled by my passion for local sports and community heritage, had not only reclaimed a vital public space, but had also ignited a movement that resonated throughout Cedar Springs. Neighbors who had long endured the oppressive rule of an overzealous HOA now found their voices, sharing their own stories of resistance and celebrating the triumph of collective action. The digital evidence that exposed the violation of national sports laws became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that our community's spirit was inviolable. Karen Miller, once the feared enforcer of arbitrary rules, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when the community unites for justice. Her influence dwindled as records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the need for reform and the dangers of unchecked power. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Cedar Springs, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Community Heritage" was unfurled between majestic oaks, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary rule, a victory for every resident and every community landmark that defines who we are, Councilwoman Roberts proclaimed, her voice full of determination and pride. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our rights and to ensure that our cultural heritage remains sacrosanct. As each new day dawned over Cedar Springs, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how the HOA destroyed our basketball court, an act that violated national sports laws, was met with a powerful, united response from a community determined to reclaim its heritage and safeguard its public spaces. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Cedar Springs, truth, justice, and the right to play will forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to defend our public spaces against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Cedar Springs would forever be a place where creativity, integrity, and respect for community heritage shone as brightly as the stars above.